Top 5 coaches who would like to fast forward through year one. These are all year one coaches. They're all safe, but their years have been, I'll call it wonky. Some have had good moments. Some have had stress, but you can see when you're watching them how they are, riding through. Not everybody can be Deion Sanders, obviously, and roll through in year one just like it's sunshine and rainbows and dewy meadows. But number 5, Eric Morris at North Texas. This is a really good, interesting, innovative young coach that I think will do really well. But when you have coaching changes, especially in the transfer portal era at schools like North Texas, when you have guys that, may have committed to you and stayed with you through it and they can be playing up a conference level, you kind of get rated a little bit. It looks like their talent Baylor took one of their tight ends, for crying out loud. So you've got all this stuff that happens. I think right now they're not where they need to be, obviously talent-wise, and they're not who North Texas can be. But I think he wishes he could kind of fast forward in the recruiting season and kind of reset the roster there. Yeah, I'm sure. They got off to a rocky start. I had somebody text me or tweet me a couple weeks ago like, oh, man, is UNT in trouble? They started off 0-2, and, I don't think so. I mean, you lost to Cal for one. Like, that's not a team you're really expected to beat right out of the gates in your first game. But they bounced back and got a win in week 3, and then they were off, or I guess they're off this week or were off last week. What is that? Yeah, they were off this past weekend. So they've had time to regroup and now can start the second half of their season and try to improve some. But, yeah, I definitely think this is a program that's anxiously awaiting the offseason to go and retool some more and put some more of their fingerprints on the roster and whatnot. I definitely think we'll see them all GJ, maybe not GJ Kenny or Deion level of active, but I definitely think he's going to change some things up when they get the opportunity. But right now, ride with who you got, and at least they got that first win under their belt. We'll see what they can do with that. Number 4, for completely different reasons, David Braun at Northwestern gets the job in the middle of the summer as an interim, and obviously things have not gone well there for
they just won.
Well, I mean, yes, but if you look at the first, we're talking about the first 4 weeks, but I do think that if I'm him, just knowing, I just wish, just fast forward through this, see where I stand professionally and move on. This is not a position, and people can say what they want about, coaches on staffs that have to go through this and yada, yada, yada. This is not something professionally any of you would want, to have to step in an interim situation and try to make this work down the line, because it is not. It's maybe the most difficult thing in the world. And they're 2-2. They beat Minnesota. I know that, but I still think it's going to be an uphill climb as they've got Penn State next week. So, well, the good news for him is there's absolutely zero expectations. Yeah. Nobody's expecting them to win any games, and they've already won 2. Given the circumstances that they just said, screw it, we're not even playing. I think some people would have, been very understanding of that, given how much of a mess, that turned into right before the season. But, they got a big win over Minnesota in overtime, and that was a huge freaking comeback. I don't know if you guys paid attention to how that unfolded, but that was an incredible win for Northwestern to put up 21 in the fourth quarter and come back to force extras in the final frame and then go ahead and get the win. That was an incredible win for them. So, it's maybe – I don't know. It's hard. He's a guy who's just kind of thrust into this situation that he was never supposed to be in. So I think the fact they're at 2-2 is actually pretty okay. We'll see what they do the rest of the way, but getting that Minnesota win was absolutely huge. Yeah. Number 3, Hugh Freeze at Auburn. I think he maybe thought that he might be able to get a better quarterback in the portal than he did, because
wait a minute, what's the timeline of when Finley left? Was it before he was hired or after he was hired? Okay.
Well after.
Well,
but, yeah, and he pushed him out the door.
I know, but wouldn't they like to have him right now?
Oh, I think so. But I think that his confidence in letting TJ Finley walk and getting in the situation that it was buoyed by the fact that I think he thought, especially I think Grayson McCall was in the water at that point, that was going to happen for them. And then when it didn't, and they got Peyton Thorne, and that hasn't worked out, and Robbie Ashford, they knew exactly who he was. He's not changed that much over the year. That Auburn and have Philip Montgomery and An offense is supposed to like go.
Dave Roberts
to struggle Ron Roberts. To struggle like they have on offense, and particularly with Hugh Freeze and Philip Montgomery in the same room, was a little surprising to me. But I do think it's because I think, and this is just my theory, he thought he might be able to get more of a diamond in the rough out of the portal, and he didn't.
Yeah, I don't know. They've had a hard time scoring points. We'll see how SEC play goes for them the rest of the way, but don't know that anybody was expecting miracle work in year one. I was very interested in seeing how much of a job he could do, right away, or how much of an instant impact he could make. But yeah, this is clearly a roster that needs some more retooling this offseason. Need to figure out the quarterback position, but maybe exactly how you would have planned out his first month, but they're also nowhere near where they're eventually going to be.
And that's why this is not like a hot seat list. This is just let me get through this kind of list. Number 2, Zach Arnett at Mississippi State. They've been uneven, to say the least, at Mississippi State. I know they're 1-3 or 2-2. I had this down and then I closed it, but they got absolutely rolled by LSU when LSU, at least as far as the rest of the teams in the SEC, Garrett, is kind of vulnerable, but LSU completely dominated them and looked like a different team than they have any other week this season against Mississippi State. They just don't even they seem really far away from the team that they looked like they were building at the end of last year. And I know they've gone through a lot there with losing Mike Leach and Zach Arnett taking over. They are 2-2, but it took them to overtime to get Arizona, and then they've lost the last 2. They just don't look the same out there at all.
There's another guy that was stuck with a bad situation, although had a full offseason, but still you lose the guy that's the maestro, and he put in a tough situation, not as much as Braun, but it's also, even though the SEC West seems to be down a notch, it's still not easy when you're just not as good as everybody else.
Yeah. And number 1, Matt Rhule at Nebraska. I know this year we experienced it here, but Nebraska is smoky, and it wasn't just because you were sitting over here while we're watching that game. Watching them is frustrating. Like they're a difficult watch on television because of the way that they play and the spurts at which they play. And then they'll show you something. They do, if they have 10 10-play drive, 9 of the plays are excellent, and then the 10th play is the dumbest thing you've ever seen. And that will change under Matt Rhule. He will coach that out of them, but he is inheriting a team that's been a dumb team for a very long time. And, you don't just go from completely dumb to completely smart in one offseason.
It's a football IQ problem.
Yeah.
It's a football IQ problem. They had a kick return or a punt return or a long, and there's all, you wait for the flag. It's like they just have forgotten how to win. They're 2-2. They're about to go 2-3 against Michigan, but they still are not a very smart team, and that's going to probably drive Matt Rhule more crazy than even turnovers or losing.
Yeah, I remember talking to a high school coach one time, and this is not the same, but it's kind of a similar thing. That you don't really know until they're in situations like what you need to coach out of them, right? So you have to see people make the mistake to know you got to coach it out of them, because you can blanket coach things like, okay, we're going to not have holding penalties. We're not going to do this. We're going to do this. But you may not know what the actual reasons for until they're against a guy in a different jersey, and you're like, oh, well, this keeps happening. We got to coach that out of him. So that's what he's dealing with. This particular high school coach was sitting in front of a room of his players, and after they'd made like 4 bad plays on special teams, he goes, how many guys know the rules of special teams in the room? And like 4 guys raised their hands. He's like, that you can't just touch a punt when they punt it to us and leave it alone. We have to pick it up.
Yeah, you would hope that if anyone's playing the game, they would understand the game.
But that was a high school explanation. But college, it's why are you committing these penalties? What bad habits do you have? You haven't seen them until you're going against a guy who's playing for a different team.
Well, they play Michigan this week, but after that, I'm going to be curious if they end up like 0 for 5 with losses to Illinois and Northwestern and reeling Michigan State and Purdue, who
teams that have been beating them lately, even though they're,
you can say year one all you want to, but they have no business like going through a losing streak past Michigan. And so I'm very curious of just where they are when they start to hit that Big Ten slate of teams that are similar, I guess, in some ways to them, or beatable, more beatable certainly than Michigan is. But yeah, that game this weekend in Lincoln should be a hot atmosphere. It's year number 1. We know that he takes some time. Don't know that he always should need to take as much time, a full year to get under your belt, and I think that's kind of where the concern may be. But they've definitely got some winnable games coming up after the Wolverines, so we'll see where they are, about the midway point.
I think the frustrating part about them is the fact that they're not beating the middle of the pack, which then puts them at the bottom of the pack, and that's who they've been for way too long.